Sometimes you don't need Jhon, but more Jhon, such as with this MOJHON STORM controller. But how much more does this Jhon offer? Well, I've been using it for about 2 weeks now, so let me tell you about that. The Storm only comes in the color black and at a price point of $54. As for what the controller itself offers, you get TMR sticks with a 2 kHz polling rate and 1 kHz for gyro, Hall effect triggers with physical switches to put them into a purely digital state, which have micro switches. And speaking of micro switches, you have face buttons, D-pads, and the bumpers with micro switches as well. Then you have 4 back buttons for mapping single buttons or macros, and you have RGB lighting. All of this can connect via cable, 2.4 GHz, and Bluetooth for PC, Switch, phones, and more. Now let's get into the box itself. On the front, you just have the controller, the name, a 2 kHz receiver. On the back, some specs in Chinese with a little bit of English, so very nice. The rest is relatively plain. When you open it up, you get the base itself, which is quite wide. I like that, and it seems to have an input and a slot for the receiver, which is very nice. I like that. Then you have the controller, which I get to in a second. You have the receiver, which seems to be have been stuck there. Nice looking receiver. Fits perfectly in here, I would guess, in this orientation. Yes. Oh, this is nice. I like the way this is included here. And okay, there's more. Nice. You get a manual in a nice little booklet style. Like it. Seems to be Chinese only. A little bit of English, actually. English, Chinese, and probably a little bit of Japanese, yes. Then extra sticks, 2 types, short and long, I would presume. Some silica gel. A nice cable. It's more flexible than it looks. It's USB A to C. 2.0, I would guess. It's flexible enough, but also not, not too flexible. And you get like a thing. User manual, tutorial, FAQ app, firmware. Okay, so just like a QR code to the website if you want to check that out. Of course, the controller itself, it has nice little stick covers. And all these like different, they only look to be different sizes, not different like caps. I will check that out later. Now let's first get to the controller itself. It's a bit strange. Just out of the first grab, it's a bit wide, right? It's a bit more angled than I'm used to with most controllers, which I think that's something you might get used to. Maybe with different hands or whatnot, but it's a bit weird on the first hold. I have to say, really weird. Sticks, they're not the smoothest. The left one is quite smooth. The right one feels a little bit like it's rubbing against the plastic. Like you can actually feel it scraping a little bit. Not the biggest fan of that. The plastic is you have this nice glossy and this nice matte one here. Ooh, okay. I really like these face buttons. They're a bit small, but man, they feel good. I like those. And these feel pretty standard. Okay. Then the shoulder buttons, very nice. I think this is for a phone clip. You probably can buy a phone clip for this, I would guess. They're a bit loud. They feel pretty standard though, like a mouse click. It's really kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like a mouse click. The triggers feel relatively smooth. You of course have. Ooh, I like how it's like, it folds in so ever so slightly. If you can see that. Here, let's. Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't expect that. You have standard control, standard triggers this way, if you do the long way. But once you move them up, they become tactical. Ooh, I like that. I think they have like a switch that they move upwards. Ooh, this is really nice. Like, see the difference? Ooh, I really like that. I wish more controllers would do this. This is really nice. Then the back buttons themselves also really tactical. Funny enough, these are like standard buttons, and these are like mouse buttons. I wonder why they did that specifically. Kind of weird. Now the D-pad. It's also very clicky. Not my favorite, but not the worst. It is a shield style. You know my opinion on shield styles if you watch my other reviews. It's kind of similar to another controller I've reviewed, the ZD Classic. But it has kind of like these cut-off corners compared to just a full-on tilted square. So yeah, on a first impression, some minor parts I don't like, but man, these triggers, they really surprise me right now. I really like that. This is plus points. This is major plus points. More controllers should do this. This is really nice. Yeah, I really like that. They really got the button feel down with this on first hand. Yeah, really like that. Yeah, first impressions are kind of slightly mixed, but it has big plus points in some areas, I have to say. When getting to the Actuation Force, I was actually shocked at first, since A, B, X and Y all came in at around 125 grams. But this waned when I got to the D-pad, which comes in at 155 grams for up, 200 grams for down, 170 grams for left, and 220 grams for right. From perfect to quite the fluctuation, a bit of a shame. Then start and select come in at 165 grams each. And last L3 and R3 with a common 700 grams and 670 grams. When it comes to the circularity error rate, the Storm is pretty much perfect with around 0.2% to 0.3% error rate. It's overall nice and round, and the sticks stay dead center. When it comes to the polling rate, you also get the advertised 2K polling rate with wired and 2.4 GHz connection, that is. Bluetooth is limited to 125 Hz. The reason why that is actually quite interesting, and I didn't know this before. Essentially, the Nintendo Switch limits the polling rate on a hardware level to 125 Hz, which means every controller that wants to connect to the Switch kind of needs to limit itself to that polling rate over Bluetooth. Then the macros are a bit of a strange situation with this controller. The back buttons do support them, but only if you record them through the software and not while playing. You can only record single inputs on the fly. But if you do decide to do macros, you can input generously long ones. And when I tested the playback, I was able to confirm that it stays accurate on repeat use. Now I get to actually using the controller. First of all, I want to mention that I had some problems with it, since I game on Linux most of the time. One problem there is that the controller itself makes use of the Xbox controller driver, but with its own device ID. Because of that, the controller was not recognized until I added it to XPad myself. So if you use Linux, be aware, this is not an out-of-the-box experience. Also, since the software on PC wants to install the Xbox 360 driver, I tried to use it there, but sadly did not work. Anyways, when it comes down to using the controller, however, I have to say that it is really nice. This comes down to two specific parts for me: the face buttons and the triggers. Because other than that, this is very similar to an Xbox or a Pro controller. I really love the ABXY feel. First and foremost, MOJHON mentions specifically that they use micro switches plus conductive rubber plus silencing foam, and you can feel it. The buttons have a nice resistance and springiness to them, while still feeling highly responsive. I think my perfect controller would use buttons like this. Then we have the triggers. I surprisingly use the short travel distance a lot on controllers when they have it, but the MOJHON really raised the bar for me. Most controllers just stop the trigger early, but here you have an actual switch in the short mode, and it feels great this way. Then I also quickly get to the D-pad. Doing the classic contra test shows that the D-pad does not shy away from pressing diagonals. At the same time, you do have some leeway, since it uses mechanical switches. The shape of the D-pad is similar to the ZD Classic Legend that I reviewed last time, but it shies away from being fully square, and because of that, you lack a clear direction with this type of shield style. You can take it off, however, so I wonder if you could swap it out for another one. I haven't found any replacements online, but I've seen this specific hold quite a bit on other controllers, so I wonder if they are somewhat intercompatible. Lastly, I get to the gyro, which can be used in native mode on the Switch, but also in simulation mode to bind the gyro to one of the sticks, according to the FAQ on MOJHON's website. I'm not sure if that's true though, since the combination that they mentioned, function plus the trigger down, turns on a zero dead zone mode for the sticks, rather than simulating one stick with the gyro. So this is a bust, but how about the native support on Switch? Well, here it works pretty much as expected, but has a little upward drift when moving side to side for a little while. When you move the controller up and down, it doesn't have any drift, but it does overshoot a little after a while. These are extremes, of course, so in normal usage you shouldn't have any problems whatsoever. I also want to quickly mention the dock. It is nice and sturdy, and placing the controller on it is also quite simple. I'm also always a big fan of docks having a spot for the dongle that acts as a pass-through. This way you don't use up a USB port only to charge a controller. On top of that, it is non-intrusive. While the controller is on top of it, it has a constant light while charging, and when you're using the controller, it's just blank. I'm a big fan of that instead of it blinking the entire time. And this brings me to the conclusion. The MOJHON Storm is a perfectly fine controller for the most part, with some really nice face buttons and these amazing triggers. I was a big fan of mechanical buttons already, but this has raised the bar in that department by a lot. My initial problem with using the controller, however, do impact my view a little bit on it. Sure, Linux is not an officially supported platform, but it not only showed that other manufacturers can make controllers that work out of the box no problem, but that the Storm seems to weirdly hijack the Xbox drivers. I'm simply not a fan of that, especially since it did not even work with an Xbox, making it a seemingly half-baked implementation. This is more of a personal problem, however. What isn't though, is the implementation of the macros, which is software only. For a price that comes close to a first-party controller, I would expect something like that to work natively on the controller itself. All in all, I wouldn't mind recommending the Storm if you either use a supported platform or are willing to tinker a little bit. And with that being said, I would give the MOJHON Storm a rating of A-.